Welcome, Mayors. My name's Stacy Walters Fujii with the African American Mayors Association. We are pleased you joined us today during our second to the last virtual session of the 2024 Economic Mobility Leadership Institute. By now, the AAMA team has met individually with half of this amazing cohort and looks forward to meeting with the rest of you to review your strategic plans. Please make sure to respond to Victoria's scheduling request and set up your individual meeting. AAMA will make a calendar of events based on your strategic plans, and that calendar will be shared with the larger community of practice within the Gates Foundation. You may be contacted by Gates Foundation or some of our partners, like the ones that you'll meet today from Opportunity Insights, who may want you to attend some of your events. And therefore, should your dates or locations change for your events, please let us know as soon as possible. In October, you will begin implementation of your carefully crafted strategic plans. Your programming must be complete and your grant money spent by March of 2025. Speaking of grants, every city should have received their grant awards letter by the end of this week. If you do not receive your letter by Friday, September 6th, please send me an email. Finally, as we enter into the implementation phase, you will be assigned a virtual EMLI fellow. This person will serve as an extension of your staff to help you implement your strategic plans and expand your office's capacity. We will follow up this month with an introduction. Thank you. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to turn it over to my colleague, Victoria, for the welcome.
Welcome, Mayors, to EMLI's student loan session. It is so great to see everyone. Just to do a roll call, we have Wrightsville, Arkansas. We have North Lauderdale, Florida, East Point, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, Campty, Louisiana, Baltimore, Maryland, Greenville, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, Durham, North Carolina, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Memphis, Tennessee, and Newport News, Virginia. So Almost Economic Mobility Leadership Institute is focusing on critical learning opportunities for mayors and their teams with the goal of creating strategic economic mobility plans to implement in your respective municipalities. Today's session will be all about student loans. And just to give you some facts, among 2016 graduates, nearly 40% of Black students graduated college with $30,000 or more in debt, compared to only 29% of white students, 23% of Hispanic students, and 18% of Asian students, according to PBS NewsHour. Our hour-long session will provide insight and data, as well as share necessary and helpful tools available to decrease the debt our students are taking on to attend college, thereby creating greater opportunities for wealth creation and retention in your communities. So I will give it back to my colleague, Stacy.
Thank you, Victoria. Today, our partners from Opportunity Insights will lead us in a presentation detailing their fantastic tool called the Opportunity Atlas, created to assist you in developing your EMLI events. Then, we will briefly discuss the real-life implications of student loans and student loan forgiveness, and finish today's session with a final presentation from our dynamic partners at Suchi. Please remember to use your chat feature to ask questions throughout the session. Without further ado, let's begin. As part of EMLI's programming and engagement, AAMA is required to share what the Gates Foundation calls priority public goods. To date, you have seen the Economic Mobility Catalog from Results for America and the Urban Institute's Upward Mobility Framework. The purpose of using these tools is to assist you in shaping your efforts to build your strategic plans. Well, today we have David Forte and his colleague Emily here from Opportunity Insights. They are going to share this final public good with you and help you create compelling programming. The catalog, the framework, and David's tool, the Opportunity Atlas, will all work together, and he's going to show you exactly how to use it. Please welcome David and Emily to the Economic Mobility Leadership Institute.
Well, thank you so much, Stacy. And we really appreciate the invitation to be here to speak with you all today about the Opportunity Atlas and our work at Opportunity Insights. My name again is David Forte. I lead our research translation work at the organization. And just a bit about Opportunity Insights before we jump in. We are a research to policy lab based at Harvard University, and our team studies the concept of economic mobility. So that is the relationship between a child's income in adulthood relative to that of their parents. So our kids going on to earn more than the generation prior to them. And our team does so using a big data approach. So we have unique data partnerships with the US Census, US Treasury, to allow our team to really look at population level data across the entirety of the US and make linkages across those data sets to tell a really robust picture of what mobility looks like in America. And we can also use that to look longitudinally across generations. So we can see children's outcomes who were born in, say, the 1980s relative to that of their parents, the generation prior to them. So today we'll look at a bit of this evidence and research on the geography of opportunity related to the Opportunity Atlas. And then we'll transition into just a quick demo of the tool itself so you can see how this works, how you can potentially use it, and just get a feel for what it offers. Okay, so again, one of the key ways that our team looks at economic mobility is through the lens of geography or place. And so what we're looking at here is the average household income in adulthood at age 35 for children who grew up in low-income families or parents who earned around $27,000 annually, which is right around the 25th percentile of the income distribution for households. And we do this, again, linking tax records and census data using dependent claiming information. So we can see for kids born in the 1980s, which is what's represented here right around 1980, what they're making in adulthood, so around 2005 or so. And we can link that back to their parents' tax records to see where they spent the most time growing up as a child. And so what we see when we do that nationally, we can see different patterns. So the red areas are areas where kids have lower mobility outcomes, so lower incomes in adulthood. The blue and green areas are areas where kids have higher incomes in adulthood. So places like Charlotte, for instance, we have some actual regression in mobility in the Southeast where kids are going on to earn less than their parents. Places like Salt Lake City or Dubuque, parts of the coasts, we have areas that low-income kids go on to have a bit better incomes in adulthood. We can also map this for the EMLI cities itself. So we can see here all of your communities represented on the map, predominantly focused in the Southeast. So we see relatively similar outcomes across these different cities. But if we zoom into any individual community, so here we're looking at Memphis, Tennessee, for instance, what we see is a dramatic variation in the outcomes within a place that has a particular average outcome for low-income kids. And the first thing you might notice is that the coloration on this map is very similar to what we saw on the national map. So we have all the way from the deepest red to the darkest blues. And what that indicates to us is that neighborhood really matters, right? It's not just about place broadly, but down to the census tract or the neighborhood level. And census tracts have about 4,000 individuals in them. So as we look at these different geographies here, you can think about it that way. So if we just highlight a specific part of the city here, we can see, the complete spectrum of colors. The differences are maybe a block or two, depending on where a child grows up. And the outcomes can be dramatically different. It can be the same as growing up in, say, Salt Lake City versus, Atlanta, Georgia on average. So the roots of mobility and the likelihood that kids go on to have higher earnings in adulthood is really based in local policy, local programs, and at the neighborhood level. And some of the characteristics of these neighborhoods that we're seeing where we have higher levels of opportunity, higher likelihood to go on to earn more than the generation prior, are lower poverty rates, so a lower poverty concentration within a particular region or neighborhood, more stable family structures, so the increased presence of two-parent households within a neighborhood or a region, not so much that your own family as a child has a two-parent structure, but that the broader community that you're growing up in has a more likelihood of this being the case. Better school quality, so both at the secondary and post-secondary, access to post-secondary. And then greater social capital, which we define in our research as the extent to which high and low income folks are in the same places together. So think about socioeconomic segregation, but also the likelihood that once they're in those places together, that they're building meaningful relationships with one another. And that has been one of the strongest indicators, predictors of economic mobility that we found in the data thus far. And we have a companion tool that we won't showcase today, but you're welcome to explore it on your own. It's called the Social Capital Atlas, and it looks specifically at this measure, and you can see what it looks like within your community, down to the zip code level. You can look at this outcome at the high school and college level. This is a unique kind of data partnership that we've established with Meta and Facebook to allow us to really explore this concept of friending and place at the same time. So before we transition into a quick demo of the Opportunity Atlas, I wanted to just give you three kind of high-level ways that we think it makes sense for you to use this tool and how it can support you in your strategic planning and your mobility efforts within your community. So the first is just being able to explore this data on your own. So you can use this tool to look specifically within your city. You can compare it to other places, and you can look also, not only where does opportunity exist, but for whom. So we can filter things by race, by gender, by parent income. So you can really get granular insights into what mobility looks like within your community. You can also understand how opportunity is changing within a place. So recently this summer, we released a new research paper that also updated the Opportunity Atlas with a new set of data that allows us to see changes across time. So what does place-based change look like? It's not just about where does opportunity exist at a point in time. Places can change, and we have new data that shows how those trajectories are shaping out for different communities. We also think that it's a really great tool for catalyzing support for economic mobility efforts. So within the Atlas itself, you can download any image that you kind of navigate to, filter to, and search for. You can insert it in presentations, share it with your teams, with your city councils, etc. We also have all of the data publicly available for download in a data format. So you have a team that's focused on analytics. They can access this data, do some custom analysis, look at outcomes across a variety of different geographic levels, and really dig into this information in a rich way. We also think, finally, this is a great tool for targeting economic mobility strategies. So as you explore this data and you start to see specific patterns, whether it be by place, by neighborhood, by race, by class, you can start to see where and for whom opportunity exists. And as you're thinking about, transit plans or early childhood learning facilities and where they might be best positioned, or housing policy and where you're looking at new, LIHTC developments or things of that sort, this is a great tool to really understand the geography of opportunity, where it exists, and what types of efforts could be beneficial for certain places. And how you can target those to specific populations. So with that, I'll pass it over to Emily for a brief demo of the tool itself. This is the landing page, so I'll stop sharing and allow her to dig into the Opportunity Atlas with you.
Everyone, my name is Emily. It's so great to be here today presenting to all of you. And as David mentioned, I'm just going to do a brief walkthrough of the Opportunity Atlas. There's obviously a lot of different ways you can look at the data or approach using this tool, but I'm just kind of going to do a walkthrough in the way that we think it's sort of the best way to kind of dive in, understand the tool, how mobility looks in your community, and sort of understand the other underlying data here to help you with your programming and initiatives. So when we open the Opportunity Atlas here, we're seeing this map that David showed in his slides, which shows the geography of opportunity across the country. So I want to look at a particular community. So I'll use the example of Memphis. So when we zoom in here, we can see, as David also mentioned in his presentation, the wide variation of opportunity within neighborhoods and census tracts here. So once we're in the tool, we can kind of start poking around and trying to understand different patterns. So for example, like here, I'm seeing that there seem to be sort of pockets of lower opportunity neighborhoods and pockets of higher opportunity neighborhoods that seem pretty discrete. And, you know, we can think about things like historical redlining practices or zoning laws, things like that, that we can, you know, couple with this data to think about how, you know, historical and current factors have factored into mobility, you know, as sort of a bolster to understanding the tool here. We can also look at this by race and by parent income. So I think this is a really important feature for thinking about, you know, targeting initiatives for particular communities. As we know and can see in the data, that opportunity, even like within neighborhoods, can vary greatly by race, parent income. You know, we're seeing here that in certain tracts, outcomes that places where white children might have better outcomes, or places where Black children might have worse outcomes, or you know, other places where we can see that, for example, there is not data here for Hispanic children. So basically, you're able to kind of filter by these different groups and understand the more specific underlying outcomes so that you can kind of target this. So in addition to looking at mobility data, we can also take a look at some of the characteristics, kind of more like broad level demographic characteristics of these neighborhoods. And while we don't necessarily have like correlations or equations in here or anything like that, it's interesting to kind of look through and see how different patterns of these different characteristics might look similar to those of mobility. And, you know, we know that mobility is a multifaceted and multi-pronged, you know, thing where there's a lot of different factors that play into whether a child achieves upward mobility or not. And so this way to kind of look at different data here coupled with mobility data can help you sort of parse out potential different contributors. So for example, we can see that the poverty rate, this pattern looks extremely similar to that of upward mobility. So thinking about like concentrated poverty in certain neighborhoods as compared to others. Similarly, like if we're looking here, we can see that racial segregation also must have some sort of role in hindering economic mobility in certain neighborhoods as well. So you can really kind of like get lost in here. There's a lot of different things to look at, but that's sort of one way to approach using some of these characteristics data to further your understanding of the mobility outcomes in your region. And then, as David also mentioned, we just added new data on how opportunity is changing over time. So the data here basically shows for children who were born about 15 years later from the original data we were looking at, how have their outcomes changed? And here we can't go into the neighborhood level just because of data privacy reasons. But we can see sort of as a whole, like how are children in Memphis doing compared to the earlier generation? So here we can see that, you know, compared to the national average, children in Nashville or Shelby County actually had improved outcomes compared to that of the previous generation, while still being lower than the national average, but sort of bucking this trend here that we saw kind of at the national level, where on average children born to low income households were doing worse. And similarly here, we can also disaggregate this by race and parent income. So we are seeing here as well that for Black children born to low income families in Nashville, those born to the later generation actually saw improved outcomes and even better than, or at a higher rate, I suppose, than the national trend, where on average, Black children born to low income households were doing better. And we can also compare the trends by group within this place. So, for example, we can compare the mobility trends between low income Black and white children here. And we can see that for low income white children, outcomes were relatively stable, declining a little bit. But even so, with the increase in mobility for low income Black children over this period, there still is a substantial gap. So we think that, while we're not getting down to the neighborhood level here, this is sort of a good indication to show how, mobility outcomes are able to change within a place in a policy relevant time frame. You can also search for other places to compare to a sister county or sister city. And this is all sort of meant to be a tool in your toolkit that you can couple with your local knowledge of the history of your community or policies that maybe were put into place during this time, and be able to sort of help paint a larger picture and tie it all together. So that is the end of the walkthrough. David, I don't know if you had anything else to conclude.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. I think what we really want to emphasize with this tool is that it's a way for you to be able to get your hands on this data and explore it for your own local community. And I think as Emily was showing those trends, we don't have specific prescriptions as to why or how mobility is changing within these places, but we understand what those trends are. And I think with your knowledge, with your own additional local data that you might pair with this, you can really begin to put the puzzle pieces together, I think, to understand if we have kids born in 78 versus 92, which is what those trends are comparing, what was happening in your community in the 90s and 2000s that may have shaped those childhood environments in a way that created different trajectories for kids from different backgrounds, from different parent income levels. So we're excited to stick around afterwards and talk more with you all if you have questions, but I'll hand it back over to Stacy.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, David and Emily. We appreciate your presentation. I'm kind of curious, you mentioned Social Capital Atlas. I'd love to know if there's a link or how to tell my mayors how to get to that. If you want to share that with me, I can make sure they get that as well in their LinkedIn group. But mayors will make David's and Emily's contact information available to you. And we certainly appreciate the presentation. Thank you, guys. We will now move on to our student loan conversation with the former student, me, and Victoria will lead the discussion.
Thank you so much for that, Stacy. And let's just jump right on in. So 2 legal challenges over President Joe Biden's SAVE plan have thrown much of the federal student loan repayment system into disarray. The SAVE plan is the newest of several income-driven repayment plans, also known as IDR plans, that base monthly payments on a borrower's income and family size, with any remaining balance forgiven, typically after 20 to 25 years. SAVE is more generous than older IDR plans and has unique features, including interest benefits, reduced payments, and a faster loan forgiveness timeline for certain borrowers. Only the SAFE plan is subject to the ongoing legal challenges, but a key federal appeals court imposed a sweeping injunction last month blocking the program. The court has suggested that student loan forgiveness under other IDR plans, not just SAFE, could get thrown out. Despite decades of guidance to the contrary, briefing on the issue continues, and a ruling could come down before the end of the year. So has anyone on the call benefited from student loan forgiveness? And if so, can you tell us how much you borrowed and what were your plans to pay off your educational debt and what actually happened? If anybody would like to share about their student loan journey.
I can jump in first, unless you see a mayor with their hand up.
No.
Okay, very good. Well, tell you what, my financial life was changed because, like many people, I borrowed money to go to law school, and it seemed like after 20 years that balance never budged. And so I paid consistently a hefty amount each and every month. And I had my student loans forgiven by the Biden-Harris administration. And it was truly life-changing and freeing because my credit report jumped up almost 100 points. They forgave like $89,000 for me. And as I spread the gospel of my student loan forgiveness, I've talked to other people who had exorbitant interest rates tied to their loans. I thought mine was bad. And, they had 250, 300,000 that was forgiven. And so it really does make a difference in a person's life, financially, how they can move and what they can do. And your loans determine what kind of jobs you take out of grad school, med school. A lot of doctors, they'll go and work in rural communities to have their loans forgiven or partially forgiven. And a lot of my colleagues, you can go to a big juicy firm if you want to, but if you go to a rural environment, they would do some form of loan forgiveness if you work there for a certain length of time. But it's been really great. And this is probably the first time in, I'd say, 25 years that I've been debt free. And that changes, of course, how you can purchase homes and cars and everything. So it was just truly a blessing, truly.
Oh, Stacy, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know that definitely changed your life. So continue to spread the gospel. 'Cause I know there's so many people who need their student loans forgiven, myself included. But definitely want to open the floor if anyone else would like to share their experiences as well. And if we don't have anyone, then we will continue the conversation. All right. Stacy, thank you so much again. And we're going to go ahead and keep moving forward with our agenda because we have another amazing presentation that is up next. And our final presentation is from our partners at Scoochie. Scoochie is a revolutionary wealth growth platform made for the underserved and underrepresented children in America. By helping families learn smart money habits and open a free, no strings attached savings account, families are able to get access to funds for their children's educational efforts. Today, we're joined by the founder and acting CEO, David Adefeso. Please welcome David to EMLI.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Stacy, I was delighted to hear about your $89,000 loan forgiveness. It's unbelievable. And I got to tell you, what the Supreme Court did last summer by invalidating the student debt forgiveness was a travesty. It would have eliminated 25%, the entire student debt of 25% of African-American kids and 50% of Hispanic kids. As you know, student debt is what I call indentured servitude. You're chained to your student debt, and very often you have it for life. the highest growth rate of loans in America, just so you know, as a percentage of our population is adults over 55 years old who signed for unlimited Parent Plus loans. It would have forgiven a lot of them. Unfortunately, student debt still remains. And so it's such a shame. And I thank you, Emily, for doing this. Thank African American Mayors Association. It's really amazing to be having a presentation like this. And I also want to thank the Gates Foundation for making this available to our mayors. For those who don't know me, and I don't know a lot of, this is the new cohort, so it's good to see a lot of you. I do know some of you, but I don't know most of you. Hopefully over the next 6 to 9 months, I'll get to know more of you. My name is David Adifeso. I'm the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Suchi. A little bit about my background. I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. I came here 33 years ago. I was 20 years old. Had a very difficult time. I was homeless for 6 months, had $250, eventually ended up, passing my CPA exam 2 years after I got here, getting to Harvard Business School, going to Wall Street, probably did about $90 to $95 billion in transactions, and then set up the Pacific Group, a wealth management firm that I expanded across the country, did very well. 6 years ago, I turned around and I realized that people like me had left a lot of people like me behind. And I started looking at how to help us, people who look like us, with economic mobility. And I realized the biggest challenge we have is the problem of education. Education and getting our kids ready for the future. And one of the biggest things that holds us back is student debt. But that's not the only thing that holds us back. The entire education system in America, unfortunately, doesn't work for some, the underserved and the underprivileged. Many of those underserved and underprivileged, primarily based upon income, are people who look like us. And so today, I've done this presentation dozens and dozens and dozens of times over the past, 6, 7 years. And so what I really wanted to do today was, rather than give a nice presentation, I wanted to give the mayors something to take home, a utility product. So what I did with my team, some of who are on the phone now, is I created a book that has detailed steps and processes about how to basically navigate student debt in 3 different formats. The first part of the book talks about, and we're going to send this to you. So it's a book that I really want you to spend time on. And really what it is if you click on any of these links, it opens up. You see the problem? Okay, so it opens up more information. So it gives you the tools that you need for 3 things. The first part we're going to talk about is the problem with education in the system. Why are the number of African American students who take on student debt double? I just heard Victoria say that, 40% versus 23%. Why is the number of African Americans who graduate from college only 45% versus 65% for the average, 40% for Black males? Well, we're going to talk about the problems, the disparity of wealth. We're going to talk about the inequities in the system. And basically what I'm going to show you, I'm going to kind of spend some time on the book. I'll show you how to use it when you do get it, and how to distribute it to your students, how to distribute it to your people who really need this. And then we'll talk about the past, what we call student loan forgiveness. The past is basically people who already have student debt. What can you do to forgive your debt? I heard about SAVE. That's an amazing program that's going through a lot of challenges. But SAVE is not the only thing. You have different types of programs that can help you forgive your debt. We'll then talk about loan repayment plans. Loan repayment plans are different from forgiveness. Those are different programs you can enter into if you don't qualify for forgiveness. So you should look for forgiveness first, and then look for loan repayment plans. And then we'll talk about, there's a lot of different resources about the different challenges that the Biden administration is going through with the enhancements. We just heard some of these, some of the major revisions. And then we'll talk about the past. Then we'll talk about the present. What if you're in school now? Or what if you're going to school next year? What can you do to not take on student debt? We'll talk about grants and scholarships. There is so much money out there. What I encourage a lot of parents to do. I've been doing helping with college funding through my firm for 21 years. I encourage them to go for grants, go for as many scholarships. There's dozens and dozens, there's thousands of grants, thousands of scholarships. Please apply. early and quickly. The next, we'll talk about the future. How do we solve these problems? I've spent 6 years developing a product I think is revolutionary that brings college funding, just like a 401k, just like a 403b, just like a TSA, that brings 401k to the employer benefit space, where employers can now offer. So some of your counties, some of your cities can now offer your employees the ability to save for college through a plan that the company sets up for them. 80% of people don't know how to save for college. And so their kids end up either not going or taking on student debt. How do you provide access to an education funding and a matching program where employers can actually put money away for employees? So I also want to leave time for questions. So we're going to jump in really quickly. I'm going to go, I have a YouTube channel that I've done a lot of talks about student debt. I've talked about financial literacy. And some of these topics take, I've spent hours and hours and hours. I have 25 minutes to present something I've spent 5, 6, 7 hours. So I'm going to go really fast. But really what I'm going to do is show you how to use this book that I prepared for you and basically answer your questions. And then I'd like to come visit your city. One by one, we'll come into your city. We'll spend some time with the students. We'll spend some time with the educators. We'll spend some time understanding your system and figure out how to solve this problem. Our product is we're launching it in Port Arthur, Texas in November. Mayor Adams has also asked us to come into New York. So he's, I meet with his CTO next week, and a lot of, he's put a lot of resources and a lot of people, into this program for us to in terms of, working to try to get us into New York. So without ado, let's talk about the past. If you have student debt, what can you do to get your student debt? Well, first of all, let's talk about the problem of higher education in America, right? What does it look like? Why is higher education such a problem, right? Okay, so 10% of earners own 67% of the wealth in America. The bottom 50% own only 2.6%. Why? The answer is education. The value of a higher education. If you go to college or any other higher education, you make 60% more than somebody who has a high school diploma. That's $1 million over your lifetime. However, higher education has become very expensive. Over the past 43 years, the cost after inflation has gone up about 1,200%. That's about 8% per year. Meanwhile, the average wages for workers for that period has gone up 38%. The median income in America is about $75,000 for a family of 4. The average cost of a college education is $145,000. Most people have 2 kids. How are you going to afford if you make $75,000? And for many in our community, where the poverty rate is about 19%, double the average, we make less than this. How can you afford to send your kid to college? $145,000. Meanwhile, we know college is the easiest path to the middle class because your kid makes $1 million more. So now you sense that vicious cycle that keeps us bound and keeps us below. We have to break that cycle. Let me show you how in a second. So let's talk about the education system in America and why it's broken. Most of the time, by the time that a child is 5 years old, they're already behind economically for a lot of different reasons. First of all, it's a very high poverty rate. So, and also the prevalence of single family households. Those 2 things are the highest predictors of poverty. So if you're a single mom and you're taking care of 2 kids, you don't have the money for childcare. So your kids come back from school, they're running around, they don't understand 401ks like the richer white kids' parents teach them about, engineering and 401ks and stem cell. By the time your kid gets to school at 6 years old, they're already behind. And studies show they stay behind. Now, many of our communities, our kids go to public school. Well, public schools, most schools are funded with property taxes. So look at many of your communities, the property taxes, which can sometimes account for as much as 60% of the cost of public education, because your home prices are lower than some of the wealthier areas. What essentially happens is the property taxes are lower. So that's less money for schools, less money for teachers, less money for books, less money for facilities, for STEM programs. So by the time these kids go through, K through 12, they are way behind. And so many of them choose not to go to college. Many of them go work in the DMV. Many of them, pretty much take on student debt. Well, that's not the only problem. The higher education system is also broken. Why? There's so many inequities. One of the things I'm going to be working with your organization, with AAMA on, is 529 plans. When the government created these amazing plans, they made it available to the states to actually run it. Well, guess what happens? Those states have farmed out almost 80% and 90% of the job to private companies, a lot of private equity firms. Private equity firms and private companies are driven primarily by profits. So what have they done? When this money savings plans come in, if you have $10,000 or $20,000, the fees they charge are much higher. So they take on those plans. But for many in our community who can only save $50 or $100, the fees these people charge on those things are lower. So they don't really make a lot of money. So there's very, very low access for our children. Now, we understand that 529 plans are actually the best way to save for college. But because of the fact that many of us don't have enough money to save in these plans, we're pretty much excluded. And so I've visited many of our communities. In our communities, it's less than 1% adoption rate for these college education plans. So if you're not saving for college, well, guess what happens? You're taking on student debt. And so we tend to take on excessive amounts of student debt, which is really crazy. An average of $52,000 in student debt. It really doesn't make any sense. And so if you scroll through the educational system, you find out special needs. Many kids in our communities have autism and dyslexia, again, because of the lack of social services in our community. Many of these kids are diagnosed as, being ADD or just not listening, and we give them medicines and things that affect their performance in life going forward. And so many of our kids aren't properly diagnosed. So the education system, K through 12, and even through higher education doesn't work for us. Well, how about the colleges and universities? What role do they play? I got to tell you something. These folks are gaming our system. The government spends, and public and private enterprises spend about $140 billion every single year on scholarships and grants. When for every $1 increase in grants, colleges and universities in America raise the cost of tuition by approximately 60 cents. They game the system. They just increase your tuition. And they reduce institutional aid by 25%, which pretty much means the kids who are applying for these Pell Grants are even more less able to afford to go to school. And so many of these kids end up dropping out. So again, the entire system, from when you're born to when you go to college, if you're in a certain socioeconomic class, which is many of us, the system is built against us. And so we really have to, first of all, recognize this. I've spent 6 years researching this. You have to first understand the system and then figure out ways to solve it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about, we're going to skip through the summary. Again, I'm going to go through really what I'm trying to do is help you understand how to use this book that you receive. Okay, so the first part we're going to talk about is a few facts about loan forgiveness, right? Loan forgiveness is the most common way, right? In certain situations, you can have forgiveness, you can have cancellation, you can have discharge. They're different things. Forgiveness pretty much means your loans go away, right? After you meet certain criteria, either you're a teacher, you're a public service worker, you work for the government, something like that. Discharge is different. Discharge usually means your either you died, your university, closed. Some private universities take advantage of students. There's a lot of fraud. Something has to have gone wrong, and so discharge basically means something a little bit different than forgiveness. The most widely used form of loan forgiveness is the public service loan forgiveness. Again, when you get to this page, this is page 15, just click this link. And this link gives you access to a plethora of information, right? And it's something that, there's probably 60 or 70 or 80 different tools here, right? And so when you go through it, all you have to do is click on the link, it'll give you more information. The public service loan forgiveness is for people who work for the government, right? Or something attached like a nonprofit. After you pay your debt for 10 years or 120 payments, you're forgiven. And that's basically what that is. There's another one for teachers. and you have to apply for it. Teachers gives you forgiveness up to 17,500 if you work for certain underserved schools in certain underserved communities. So loan forgiveness basically applies to two, public service and teachers. Well, how about loan discharge? Loan discharge, basically if your school was closed, you can get a discharge. If you, false certification, if a school applied for student, you know how we did these liar loans in the late in 2005, 2006, when they would jack up your income, say stuff you couldn't afford, and you buy a house. They do the same thing for loans. You get to these schools and they, fudge your income. They give you, they basically, give you money they know you can't afford. Or if they did that, you could potentially have your loan discharged. If you couldn't qualify for a loan, but you were still given a loan, you could have a discharge. Unpaid refund, if the school closed down and you were unable to, the school had already received your money, right, from the government, and the school closed down, but they didn't give your money back to the government, you can actually have that loan discharged. So there's eligibility for parents. For parents, this massive thing called Parent Plus loans that's drowning out many HBCUs. I got to tell you, the biggest number of Parent Plus as a percentage, HBCUs, are parents who are unable to afford and who haven't been able to save. We send our kids to HBCUs and we just sign for those loans. And so pretty much you can have those loans forgiven. Under any number of situations, God forbid the kid dies, disability, if there's fraud, the school closes down. So there is a possibility for that. Bankruptcy, it's very, very difficult to discharge a loan in bankruptcy, but it is possible. And if that's the last option, unfortunately for you, I would encourage you to talk to a lawyer and explore it. There have been some cases where loans have been forgiven. Where loans have been discharged in bankruptcy. It is a possibility. Please use that option if you can, if that's the last option for you. Okay, so I'm going to skip through that. We just talked about loan forgiveness and loan discharge. That's basically your loan going away after a period of time. But that's not all. You could still have this thing called loan repayments. You got to pay your loan back, right? There's many, many different ways that will help you pay your loan back, but you have to understand those ways. Once you understand those ways, you want to reach out to your lender. And then your lender, many of these lenders are profit driven, understand. So they're not necessarily motivated to give you the best deal. They're motivated in many cases by making money, even though their loans are guaranteed by the government. I'm sorry, that's just the way the system works for a lot of private companies. So you have to do the research yourself. You have to understand what works for you. And so that's why I created this book. I would strongly encourage you, mayors, to give this book to, when it's provided to you, to people who are, young kids, 16, 17, 18, kids who are in school, kids who already have loans and things like that, because this is a really good, you'd have to go into dozens and dozens and dozens of different websites to find this type of information. We've provided it all in here for you, pretty much free of charge. So we're going to go through the legal challenges. Well, we're going to skip over legal challenges over here. There's different types of loan repayment programs, income-driven loan repayment programs primarily. SAVE is the most important one, right? And that's a really big deal. SAVE, you can wipe out your loans, anything up to, it goes up to 5 or 10% of your income on average. They're trying to dispute that. It was 10% before. The Biden administration said if you make $30,000 or $32,000 or less, $15 an hour, they'll wipe out your loan, and then there was a dispute, they took it to court. But the SAVE program is one of the best programs. Again, if you make under $32,000 a year, roughly $15, your monthly payment will be zero, right? And if you so keep that in mind. It's between 5 and 10% of your discretionary income. So the SAVE program is what most people would qualify for. But the SAVE program is only one. There's also pay as you earn, right? If you're a borrower and you borrowed before, after 2011, this program gives you anything less than 10%. You pay less than 10% of your discretionary income. The income-based repayment programs that depend on how much money you make. Again, many people are drowning in student debt. You don't need to drown in student debt. You don't. You can understand your rights, do the research, call your lender and tell your lender you want to enter into a program that ensures you don't pay any more than 10% of your discretionary income. Your discretionary income is defined as your discretionary income is sort of the poverty rate plus 50%. So it's about $22,000. That's the base. And then they take what you make. Let's say you make $60,000. They take 60,000, subtract 22,500. That difference is your discretionary income. 10% of that is what you should be paying. So please don't drown in student debt. Use this tool as you need. So I'm going to skip through over really quickly. We talk about existing programs. This tool gives you existing programs that the Biden administration has enhanced. It gives you different programs, new programs that the Biden administration has done some amazing stuff, right? Many of this stuff is being challenged in many, many ways, but you still could apply for many of them. And if you apply, the clock starts running for you. So please don't be shy. If you hear about there's a challenge, if you hear about, apply, because you could still win. Okay, so I want to jump through now to the present. And I want to talk about, again, we have stuff about loans and grants here. We have stuff about scholarships over here. Please spend some time. I don't want to, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time. There's tons and tons of grants available for you to be able to use. Please go into this page, Saving for College, Scholarships. We've made that all available to you. Now I want to talk about the future. What I want to talk about are kids who, I'm going to skip through, are kids who basically have taken on, are young. I'm going to stop my screen and I'm going to share the future. What can you do for kids who are under 18 years old who need to go to college but don't have any money? What can we do? Well, I've created a program that basically helps your city, your county, your institution, employers in your community create a benefit plan for your employees to be able to save for college. Many people don't know where to save for college. That's the first problem. Money is, where do I save? Where do I start? Which program? You have to go search. We've made it all easy. We're in the process of offering all of the 529 programs. All you have to do is get your employer to sign up. So I'm going to spend about 3 minutes. I know we don't have a lot of time on this, and then I'd love to take some questions. So this program that we've created, talk about the problem. This is our program, Suchi Education Program. Compared to a regular 529 program, you have automated payroll contributions comes out of your payroll, employer match. You can actually have your employer match. It's gifting. You can have your friends and family actually give money into the plan instead of birthdays and holidays. It's easy to use. We actually built a financial intelligence platform in here so you can actually learn. It's a one-stop destination. And for kids whose parents don't have a job or who are on food stamps, we have a program where we work with the state and we work with nonprofits to actually help them fund their education. What are the benefits for an employer? It aids in hiring top talent. It boosts your employee loyalty. I've done college funding plans for 21 years, 529 plans, custodial accounts, other types of accounts. And I've done 401ks for 21 years. I have people raid their 401ks all the time to buy a house, to travel. I've never had a person raid the kids' college plan, never. People love their kids. And so if you set up a plan for like this for your kid, it boosts loyalty and assists with retaining employees. You don't have to give the money to the employees right away. You can have them wait for 3 years, invest over 3 years, and many people will wait to get this. Why should an employee do this? You get a massive tax benefit, automated payroll, and employer match. Let's talk about the tax benefits and employee tax savings. If you do a college savings plan, it's tax deferred. It's like a Roth IRA. And you get a tax deduction in 39 states. And in 9 states, there's no taxes. Tax deduction to save for your kid's college plan. What does an employer get? This is fully tax deductible. It's like a 401k. And so I want to stop over here because we're running out of time. But I would love to come to your city. I'm going to put my cell phone number in the chat. And if you have any questions, this is my cell phone number. Please reach out to me. Whether it's doing lessons, lectures for your students, for your instructors, for your key stakeholders on how to get scholarships, how to get grants, whether it's doing webinars for your constituencies on for loan forgiveness, whether it's coming in and helping you install Suchi so you can help fund college for your kids. We are willing. We're here to help, and we're at your disposal. Thank you for having me. Do we have any questions in the final 3 minutes?
Thank you so much, David. Do we have any questions? I know that we're almost at time, but definitely wanted to allow for any questions. Mayor Rainey?
Yeah, hopefully you all can hear me. David, thank you so very much for presenting. I'm glad to hear you once again. But I also was interested, I know you mentioned employer-based benefit. Have you seen it work in like churches and nonprofits, as well as, I can imagine it can work in a for-profit entity and government, but smaller organizations. So I'm thinking about the outreach that we can do within the community to spread the word, not only about Suchi, but just the information.
It's not just private, it's nonprofits, it's foundations, it's government institutions like state government can set it up, city governments can set it up, county governments can set it up. There's no limit. We're working, and in many states, one of the challenges we ran through, and we've solved that problem, was many states like in Georgia. I remember in Georgia, you can't give money in terms of a match, right? Because the basic premise is you put in $50, your employer or the city matches $50. Charity begins at home. We're talking about student debt. Why wouldn't you allow your city employees to be able to save for college? Why wouldn't you match their funds? Why wouldn't you start with them? So we ran into that problem in Georgia. And then there was an IRS, we asked the IRS. Well, we didn't. Somebody else asked the IRS, how does this work? It's a fringe benefit, just so you know. It's a qualified, so IRS counts it as a fringe, but it's just like your health insurance. It's just like if you give your employees health insurance, you can do this. If you give your employees TSA or 403B or 401k or pension plan, you can do this. It's a regular pension plan. So we'd love to work with you on, this is something your church wants to install. Yes, they can.
Yeah, I was
thank you.
specifically going to think about, like, we are, like, for instance, we have the Arkansas Municipal League and Health benefit program. So we don't provide it directly to our employees from the city directly. But I know we can talk later on, and I would love to converse with you and welcome you to Wrightsville as well. Sorry about that, Stacy. Thank you.
Are you in
That's
Arkansas?
okay. No, we love this. Hold on just a second. We're going to leave the call open for 5 minutes afterwards, but let me finish up so we can stop recording and then you guys can talk a little more. We want to thank all of our incredibly brilliant guests, David, Emily, other David. Thank you everyone for joining us. We've recorded today's session and we'll make it available online. You will be able to see the links to the products discussed today in the EMLI LinkedIn group. Special thanks to our partners at Opportunity Insights and to Suchi for closing out our session around student loans. Be sure to follow us on social media at Our Mayors and visit us online at ourmayors.org. Thank you for joining us today. Our final session will be on September 19th. And all cities will need to be present. That will be our final session, and we'll give you some gems for your implementation phase. This concludes the session. Thank you so much. All right.